Hello and welcome back to another edition of Indiepocalypse Radio. Now, not following a 8-hour live stream, just a regular, relaxed Saturday in which I had a regular, normal week. We are here with a series of guests from this time, of course, primarily the game development world. I'm your host, Andrew, the host of the aforementioned Indiepocalypse Radio, which is, of course, your midway point, or perhaps it leans more towards the chat side of a point between a post-con hangout and a interview show. I'm Andrew, which I already mentioned, of course, right? Indiepocalypse is the monthly anthology of indie games, and this is kind of my hangout companion to it, as an excuse to be like, hey, what if I just kind of found a good reason to hang out with people? And for someone such as myself who hates social media, we have guests here. Our first guest, who you may know from, in the context of Indiepocalypse, from Indiepocalypse 59 with The Bad Zone, is Finn Levy. Finn, how are you doing today?
Hi, Andrew. I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
No, great to have you on the show. I have an important question right off the top, a question that I'm dying to know the answer to, because it's the most important question to the state of the zine in total, which is, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember. It feels like it's as old as the hills
Okay,
at this stage.
that's
In the office.
that's both an
Um,
increasingly common answer, which I guess is in some ways a reassuring answer.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing that got me, I was sort of ambiently aware of Indiepocalypse for quite a few years, but the thing that got me to sort of look at it again and consider submitting a game was I listened to a podcast you're on, actually, I think last year or the year before. I can't remember now. I can't even remember the name of the podcast, which is bad, but it featured like a skull on the cover of it, and you were talking about Indiepocalypse, and yeah, it was just you talking about it a bit more, and sort of inspired me to sort of give it a go.
Oh, now
And
I'm thinking of
try and
what it
submit.
was, because I'm like,
Yeah,
I should be
I
able
should have researched.
I should be able to
uh,
remember it. There's only like one a year that I do.
uh,
It's not
anyway,
yeah.
yeah, whatever it was.
It was probably wait was
It's
it
that.
deep probably Deep Hell, right? Maybe.
Oh, Deep Hell, that
Yes.
definitely rings a bell.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I'm like Deep Hell was in the first year, so I was trying to think like, what did I do in the last couple
Mm.
of years that had a skull?
Oh, okay. I must have listened to it in last year, and
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Well,
it's from a
that's the
few
benefit
years
of all
ago.
this
So.
content we make is that it lives forever.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Nothing dies on the internet, so yeah.
Except when you want it
And
to not die.
yeah, it was and it was you just saying like, oh yeah, like I've submitted to a bunch of things and failed a bunch of
Yes.
times. That sort of gave me the courage to submit and potentially fail as well.
Oh
So
yeah.
I
No.
appreciate
Plenty of people often, plenty of people that there is someone who was just in 60 who had submitted, I think, for like years and years, and it was always like there is something that is there like 80% to something, and then eventually then like this last month they got that something. I was like, perfect, finally.
nice. Yeah,
Like,
it's good to see the perseverance pay off. Yeah,
yeah, even when I things get rejected, usually it is optimistic of like, well, it's just one thing now. Eventually, maybe there'll be something. And of course, I don't have like, you know, I'm not like a kind of festival is going to give you back a thing of graphics, sound, gameplay. Here's your score.
oh,
Um, it's largely on the whims of one individual, and that individual is me.
yeah, yeah. It's quite a big responsibility, though, right? Like you're defining a lot of taste.
Yeah, that's it's a
Picking
thing
these games.
I do wonder about sometimes if it does like what is the influence of it, are there people, I mean there are definitely people who are like very, I'll call them normcore gamers, who,
Sure.
especially at events, I'll sell them a copy of this, and then like, it is very very far from the realm of traditional games in a lot of cases.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely have that with talking to any of my sort of real life friends or family about the games I make in my free time. It's just
Yes.
like so far removed from any context they have for the games they know that it's yeah, it can be difficult to even explain them to some degree. Uh,
It's something people go, "Oh, what's this game?" It's like, well, in a lot of cases, the games are so short that you just kind of need to play them to get them. Let the game
yeah,
do the
yeah,
talking.
yeah,
And
for sure.
speaking of games do the talking, games can't actually talk on a show like this. So, could you talk for your game, The Bad Zone? And if people aren't familiar, what is it?
Sure. So the Bad Zone again, it's very short, so
Yes.
I suggest just go and play it
Right.
if you're curious. But it's a platformer. I describe it as an evil platformer. And in the game, there's a series of doors, and each of them require a certain amount of coins for you to progress through a given door. Uh, and as you're collecting coins, you also can move faster and jump higher, so you can collect coins that you previously couldn't reach. And the core of the game is built around sort of a cruel joke that I play on the player,
Yes.
really, where there's a door that asks you to get 100 coins, and that 100th coin is always just slightly out of reach, and the game just sort of leaves you there to consider consider your choices and just close the game for yourself, I guess.
Yeah,
Eventually,
and I think the beauty is, besides preying on people's kind of their Metroidvania drip feed, is like people have played enough games where it's like I think I'm just doing this a little bit wrong. Um,
yes, yeah,
you're like, if I just jumped a little bit later, like a second later, like a hair, I would probably be able to get it. Uh, like it's
yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that I was playing with, I guess, is there is a sort of implicit trust that you give to a game creator when you boot up their game, right? That it is going to be completable, and
yeah.
there's a lot of conventions surrounding that, and I just wanted to break that trust. I guess I do give you fair warning,
Yes.
describing it as an evil platformer.
Right. Right. You
It's
you are
relatively
clear.
short as well, but
You are the
yeah,
main pop. You're the population of the bad zone, so you are not. You're like, and your game is completable, just not within our standard understanding of completable games.
yes, I guess so. Yeah, uh, but yeah, it's yeah, there are a few, other than that sort of like trust element, there are a few other things that I was sort of interested that I've been thinking about in the process of making it, I guess. I, uh, I've been thinking a lot, as I'm sure many people have, the sort of adjacency that the games industry has to the gambling industry,
Yes.
and how we're the sort of little brother of that industry.
Yeah, and how
Um,
the adjacency shrinks often with time. Um,
Yes, yeah. Well, this is the thing though, is like I've sort of been looking at much older games, like a foundational text like Super Mario Brothers, right?
yeah.
That game is, you're collecting coins on a regular basis, and it's how much of the appeal of that game is being able to hear a nice coin collection sound at,
Right.
you know, random intervals.
Right. Like
You know,
the what's it called, the kind of repetitive chance mechanic that defines you think of defining gambling is not as present, but the audio visual feedback of like
yeah, that sort of very base level, positive feedback loop of jangling keys in front of your face is
yes,
there, right?
right.
I guess it's like most explicit with the question block, right? Where you hit it, and what are you going to get outside of it, right? Could it be a mushroom? Could it be a coin?
Yeah.
Uh, and how many times are you going to hit it again and again to see how many coins you get, right? And it's like,
Yes. No.
uh, yeah, it's not. I don't know if it's a Skinner box per se, but it's definitely Skinner box adjacent. I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of stuff that is inherently kind of, I want to get my buttons. I hit my little button and my number goes up, and I want to keep making that number go up so much as it will allow me to forever. Um,
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I guess the bad zone is questioning. yeah, why do we play some of the games we play? I guess is it just to see a number go up, and what does it mean when that number can't go up all the way that we want it to?
Right. When do we learn to step away from the number?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um,
And
uh,
in a lot of ways, forces you to finally step away from the number.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's sort of You have to realize like, oh, what the hell am I doing? Like, I should just stop this
Right, right.
right now. Close
I,
the application.
right.
Um,
I don't need to I don't need 100% this experience, and the more explicit gambling stuff that is increasingly present is like built on completion. Your the advent of the what if we just put gambling mechanics on top of every video game that is increasingly
yeah,
like a model.
yeah. It's sort of permeated everything, right? It's not just the big AAA boys that are doing it. It's all these roguelike games, right? That's sort of the indie industry in many respects. Are all about this sort of like pulling of the lever of a slot machine and seeing
Right.
what combination of stuff you get.
Right.
Um,
There's a difference to it than to say how it's present in a game like Rogue, um,
sure.
where that is playing more on like unidentification and less a strict like, oh, I want to get 30 points and then my little slot machine power up thing is going to activate and I'm going to
Yeah.
see what my thing is. It's like the gambling adjacentness is laid more bare.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and just, even like, Bellatra, right? It's got all this sort of like gambling theming around it.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of really good game design in that game, but it's also, you are just playing video poker on some level, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
uh,
I've never I'm still unfamiliar. I've never have, maybe perhaps never will uh play Blatro, but I'm increasingly learning tiny bits and bits through scraps that people say.
sure. Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
also
It's a big, for good or for better or worse.
yeah, it is. It's like, the weird thing is, as the enemy of like the short experience, um, as if more expectation is of like the infinite gambling sort of thing. Like people are like, oh, what's the value? How long is this going to be? This game better be long enough to be a good time value. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. There's, So I'm in my day job. I work for a game studio,
yeah,
and sort of making games commercially, and that's always a big question in the stuff we're making. We're not a very big studio. We're about 16, which is a decent
right.
size, but still the size of game that we can make and the amount of content that we can you know put into our games is that's always sort of like hovering in the background, right? That value proposition. Um, and yeah, it influences a lot of design, right? And unsurprisingly, we're making something in the roguelike genre right now,
Yes.
because it's just super efficient for sort of in
Right.
terms of
Right.
that value to players.
It's an interesting prospect. It's kind of like returning back in some ways to the idea that, like, I feel, and if this makes sense, games increasingly approached a point where like they were meant to be beaten. If that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
like especially with like ever encroaching like RPG mechanics, it's like, oh no, if you just play this game long enough, you will complete it. Versus like you play, go back to Mario. If you don't know how to navigate that weird little mushroom guy at the front that doesn't know how to get it, that like won't get out of your way, uh, you'll never beat it. It's not like
yeah. It's a type of design that rewards just the time that you invest in it rather
right.
than emphasizes time rather than skill, I suppose. Uh, and yeah, I mean, who's to say what's better or worse, right? It
Right,
obviously appeals to a large number of people, right?
right.
But I do sometimes feel a bit of frustration with it, and I guess some of
Yes,
that frustration is coming out in the bad zone.
there because
Uh,
it is a because really you can make games that require neither, you know, that
sure, yeah,
that have no skill checks and also do not take a lot of time. Uh,
yes, yeah, definitely. But yeah, that skill element, yeah, I guess, yeah, you want that. We've struggled to come up with ways of creating expressive, like forms of player expression that aren't just skill expression, I
yeah,
suppose, or it is just sort of becomes like more of a sandbox game,
right,
or
right.
something very narrative driven. But narrative driven games are sort of limited in content and expensive to produce, right? So uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it costs money to make a lot of unique things. Uh,
yes,
um,
um,
and I think that's part of the appeal to like the increasing focus on like low res return to low res graphics. It's like, oh, I can make a lot of these things very quickly. A lot of
yes, yeah, yeah. Uh, that's something that's been like very heartening to see, I suppose, is how few players seem to actually care about fidelity for all the industry talks about, good graphics and the rest of it.
yeah.
Um,
I
you
I
know,
my working theory with all this that I've stated on the show a few times is that it's like a time thing, and it's like if people who are like born or like consciously aware of games like within or like post that kind of like 360 PS3 era did not see the same like graphical leaps you did if you were like coming from the NES, and onward,
sure,
where it's like, oh, every new box looks way different, looks so much better, and like, I mean, technically a PS5 looks better than a PS3, but like, how much better? It's not a difference between like an Atari and a Genesis. you know,
sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And like the kids just don't care, right?
right?
They're playing Minecraft and Roblox, and
Exactly, and those
those,
look, those look quote unquote terrible. Um,
yes, exactly, yeah, made by
they're not.
lazy.
We don't. How many pores can I see on Minecraft Steve's face?
Yeah, not enough.
Right. They're like, I can't. How often is Roblox using RTX technology? It's it's like a silly bit of people are just going to use what they can use.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it definitely poses a interesting, and we're sort of seeing the effects of that play out now, right? In the larger scale,
Yeah.
bigger industry. Where does the industry go when technology, the technology railway is sort of running out of track? Um,
Yeah, and that's
we've got
and
sort of
it's
fast coding now and stuff as well, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how they innovate. But it seems to be mostly gambling and live service stuff so
right,
far.
right. it's
Uh, yeah.
it's the unfortunate thing where that seems to be because I was talking, you know, very briefly yesterday online. When I say talking, that means like one comment. That's me talking online in social media, um, but about horror games, horror anthologies. And I always thought of traditionally you come from something like film where horror is the low budget big cash kind of thing. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and unfortunately, it seems to be like in games, gambling might be that. um, that might be the thing that is like, oh, it makes um, a lot of money for lower amount of work we have to put into it.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, although except that it seems that that sort of pie is it isn't unlimited, right? There's only so many players that can be in that space, and we've
Right,
seen quite
right,
high profile crash burns this year
yeah.
in the last year. Uh,
And some of them, you're also competing with actual gambling. just
Yes.
actual video gambling.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is sort of crazy to me how much gambling does seem to have become normalized in all of society, right? Like
You're right.
even just the amount of sports betting stuff that I see,
Yes,
like advert.
that is
It's,
definitely. I've seen a huge uptick in sports betting uh,
yeah.
everywhere, like billboards. I don't know how it is over where you are, but
Oh
we
no, the UK is yeah. We love sports betting.
okay. So maybe you
Yeah.
have a longer history of loving sports betting than we do in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah. My understanding is that the UK has always been actually quite nice to betting companies, and it's only a recent thing in the US.
Yeah, and I
But
think that's even like a state by state basis too, in terms of
right,
like I think other states were getting sports betting long before over where I am in Massachusetts was getting sports betting. Maybe like I was hearing a lot of like podcast DraftKings ads, um,
sure.
years before I started seeing the billboards all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I wonder, yeah, what does it mean for society, right? When all these things are sort of shouting at us,
Yeah,
gamble more,
and
and the games that we're playing that aren't directly gambling are, you know, encouraging that sort of behavior, I guess, or
right.
normalizing it.
And it goes hand in hand with ever increasing income inequality because it's like, well, if I gamble, I can bridge that gap. Except you don't bridge the gap; it just kind of traps you there forever, even more.
Yeah, yeah. The horror stories you hear from some people who, yeah, who fall down the hole with that, yeah, it's terrible. It's scary,
Yes,
quite frankly.
gambling.
Yeah,
What a thing. I don't encourage
yeah.
it.
But Bellatra is fun, so
Yes,
it's
video
okay.
game, fake gambling. Realize instead of taking that finite money, take that finite time you have, and
Exactly.
and spend it. Um, Finn, we are approaching the end of our segment, so I have two crucial questions that I need to ask you that are the standard Indiepocalypse questions. I hope you're prepared. Uh,
I'm not really, but go ahead, shoot.
First up, what's your favorite type of rock?
Favorite rock? Ooh. I'm gonna say sandstone. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, just the colors. You get a lot of color variety in it. And it looks very pretty. So sandstone is my answer.
And second, uh, do you have a favorite Toho character?
I don't actually know what Toho is.
Well, Toho is,
Um,
of course, a long running bullet hell franchise that has various unofficial, semi official, I don't know how you want to phrase it, but other games made within the wider Toho umbrella. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
I'd recommend checking it out. Worth the time,
Is
I
there is there
think.
like a specific? Is there a specific one that's like a good introductory to it, or
It could be anything.
could be any?
Could be anything. Whatever you feel your best intro is.
Okay,
Uh,
I'll give it a Google and yeah,
yeah,
see what's up.
there are tons of main lines, but if bullet hell is not your thing, there are a bunch of other because it's. I don't have time to get into the Toho like quote unquote licensing, but anyone can make Toho games is the short of it. Generally,
Right.
caveat
Interesting.
asterisk on the statement. Uh, but that said, Finn, thank you for joining me here today.
No
Uh,
problem. Thank you for having me.
we're gonna go on a break, and we'll be back on the other half of about a minute 45. Goodbye for now. coming. Oh, hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. I accidentally hit the fade button. It freaked me out instead of the transition button. That was RJ Lake with "Begin," all caps. And now, would you believe it? Look what we have here. It's RJ Lake. Hello, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing all right. I'm drinking my coffee. I'm a little tired, but like not in a bad way.
Right, right.
Still waking up.
Oh, I am up and fresh and ready to go. It is a Saturday, and I also have to get up like 6 o'clock every single day for work. So.
Oh wow, yeah, no, that makes sense then. My work day starts at it feels like a random time each day because of the meetings that I have throughout the week. So
Right.
it's just like playing roulette. Speaking of gambling, I'm
Yes.
like throwing darts at the wall each day as to when I'm waking up that day.
A roulette of your life. But
Yeah.
I will. That's not true. I will sometimes sleep in on a Saturday to get a full 8, because I don't have to go to work. but but this person, you make music. You have these weird dartboard like schedules. What's up? What do you do? If people are unfamiliar.
Yeah, my name is RJ Lake. I am a musician for several years and a game developer for almost as long. I am directing Unbeatable at D-Cell Games alongside Andrew Tsai, who's the other director on the project. And also, the biggest thing that I'm known for besides that is I do music and sound design and voice direction for Strange Scaffold projects, and I've been doing that since the first game that they released, which was Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs.
Yes.
Um,
Which is like feels like not even that long ago. you know.
yeah, it does feel not even that long ago, but it was 5 years. That's half a decade now.
Yeah,
that
that's
Strange Scaffold games have worked.
Well,
have
I
been
think
around.
the problem is I think of so many things in my life game wise is like pre and post Indiepocalypse, and I've been doing this for 5 years.
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh, that makes sense. Listen, a pre and post unbeatable is definitely a metric for me in my life, and that's
right,
that marker is like 2018. So
right,
that feels shorter than it is.
yeah.
But
Because I'm always like, well, everything that happened like before that is a long time ago. Everything's ever happening concurrent, like barely happened.
we're still in current era.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And it's like, no, the current era, time keeps going forward, and
Yeah.
and the current era, like I didn't even realize, I'm like, my God, Unbeatable is 2018. I wasn't even thinking about that. Similarly, it's something like, oh yeah, not too long ago.
Right. Unbeatable, for the record, publicly, like the most public acknowledgments of Unbeatable probably go back more to 2021.
Right. Okay.
It's one of
Yes.
those games that, like we say on the D-Cell Games mission statement somewhere, there's an official mission statement, not mission statement, but like a description of the studio that I wrote for like one of the official websites somewhere. And basically, what we say there is that Unbeatable is our first game and also our second, third, and fourth game, too,
Right.
if you think about it, because we kind of restarted it several times to try to get it, like, figure out what the thing was, figure out what we were doing with it.
Right.
Team was new, X and Y and Z.
Yeah, and then
But
the nature of the business is that so many of the team members have probably made games in between the start of Unbeatable and
oh
now.
yeah, absolutely. Unbeatable was not my first project, and it wasn't the first project for Jeff, but it was the first project for many of the people working on the team. And now it is not
Yeah.
the first project anymore. It's very heartening and also strange to see like a game like this grow with the people that are making it
Yeah.
alongside that. I think I mean you were talking about Dojin games during the break a little bit. And I
Yes.
think that that's kind of the closest spirit to what D-Cell feels like.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, very much in that kind of tradition of we were not a company at the start. I mean, we are now a company because we need to have a bank account to
Yes.
get paid to pay people. But like we were just a group of people that came together because we liked each other, we liked doing things, and then we ended up making a game that grew large and strange and weird as
Yeah,
a
like
result. And that's very
a weird little circle, you might say.
yeah, like a Dojin circle. I'm very familiar with that style of working.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the thing that I grew very accustomed to, and working in more traditional company structures, whenever I end up doing it for like a contract work, is very strange.
Yeah, yeah. There's a strength, a big strength to like the impermanence and the what's the word I'm looking for? The fluidity of like independent work. Whereas
Yeah.
like, hey, us 8 people, this is the game we're working on for the next 5 years, no exceptions.
Right. Yeah. If there were not exceptions, I do not think D-Cell would survive.
Right.
I think that it's a like you need to be able to. Basically, I think the thing I want to say just the most emphatically is like I am as opposed to non-competes as a person can possibly be.
Yes,
I
right.
think that like moonlighting is kind of the lifeblood of a healthy industry because it means that people get to talk to each other and communicate with one another and swap stories and be very effective at just being people, which you don't get to do as much if you're trapped in one spot.
Yes.
By like, yeah.
I've had submissions come through and people use pseudonyms, and like as if their company was ever going to use anything from their weird art games,
No, I know, but it sucks because they're extremely stringent about this.
Yeah.
There was a company that I cannot name because the story is public, but the company name is not. Did you watch the Bass Reeves video that Noodle put out recently?
No.
So there's a documentary that the YouTuber Noodle put out about a Strange Scaffolds project called Bass Reeves Can't Die that I was a part of.
Yes.
And a major part of the narrativization of that story was regarding the fact that one of the lead programmers, Colin, could not work on the game anymore because of a job he got at a larger studio.
Yeah.
And so like that swapping out caused problems and led to X and Y and Z. But that kind of thing constantly happens. We have constant problems where because of one like we'll get something where it's like I don't think it's a problem, let me check, and then they check and it turns out actually no, it's a problem because for whatever reason bigger company has in their contract that we own everything you make.
Yes. No, I've talked to people. I talked at an event semi recently. People are saying I talked to someone who's like their university doesn't allow them to post about their games or their games on Twitch, and I imagine for a very similar reason, of no, we have the rights or whatever to everything you ever make here.
Right, exactly. It's very similar to. It's slightly different. It's like it's parallel to the very like Japanese games industry Nintendo thing of like we don't want to put people in front of the customer. Like we don't want there to be a personality that's associated with the game being created because then you get people who get egos or whatever the rationale is for it.
Right.
Like you want it to be very anonymous. People like Kojima and the like are extremely rare in the Japanese games industry traditionally.
Right, because then you also have people who have allegiance to the actual creators instead of just the company.
Right, exactly, and that becomes that gets weird for the company in their estimation. You want people who associate Mario with Nintendo, not with Miyamoto. Although I think that largely failed.
Right,
Miyamoto is
they have the benefit of him being in a high-ranking position for like 30 years.
Right, he's never going to leave Nintendo.
Right, so
yeah,
I think you can probably let a guy like that out occasionally, but it's like you see in the industry all the time, and even in like on the indie space too of these games are made by indie publisher, not the millions of studios that make them all.
Oh God, it sucks. It sucks. So this is like the big frustration with. Okay, I want to be very explicit here and very careful with my words here, but I have no beef with Devolver Digital as a publisher, as a an entity that puts out games. But there is definitely a sensibility with people who play games released by Devolver Digital that this is a project created by a publisher that has a vibe and rather than this is a project created by a person. And I think that's not even necessarily Devolver's fault because they tend to put the creators very front facing when they talk about things or like when they have the credit. Like the logo, I think almost universally is of the creator first and not Devolver on all of their projects. But like that's the same thing with Annapurna. Annapurna games have the same exact thing,
right? And I think there's it's propping up more even like in other industries. Like you see A24 a lot now.
Yes. Oh God, the A24, an A24 style film, an A24 vibe. When you actually watch the individual movies, and there is not a single vibe among them.
Right.
They're very individually driven. And they tend to put out good, like they tend to put out creator-focused work, but because they have a house style for marketing specifically, that's what people are paying attention to and kind of coming away from.
I think it's the same thing you run into with people like Devolver and Annapurna, is they have Devolver is a pixel blood one and Annapurna is serious art one, and they have like their lanes that they try to stick themselves in. Which leads to people they see that house style and they think, oh well, that's what it's the next Devolver game.
It's the next Devolver game. This is actually on the contrary to that, like the flip of that. I do really kind of like the way New Blood approaches it, where they're sort of similar to Devolver in terms of how they go about marketing and collecting like all of their projects together, but they are a collective of people. They're not a publisher in the traditional sense. Like everyone sort of works on things together, is my understanding.
Yes. And I definitely, at least observantly, haven't seen New Blood taken in the same kind of like spoken the same kind of way of like, oh, this is a New Blood game,
Right, like I see people giving individual props to Erdorf all the time for Faith, and that is very heartening. I think that there's better ways to do all of this stuff, but the problem is that the better ways need funding and money, and they won't get them.
Right, it's like, and it's a long-standing problem with like games industry and crediting in general. Where if you go to, for instance, the Game Awards and look to see how many people are actually credited as winning awards, and I think the number is like actors and composers maybe, actors yes, and I think that's the end of the credits for actual human beings.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's games that win awards or companies that win awards.
Right. Like, it's extremely rare, again, that you get someone like a... Look, people have given the guy a lot of grief for maybe justifiable reasons for his outbursts on stage and how ridiculous of a person he appears to be. But, like, there's a reason that Joseph Fares getting up on stage and making a personality of himself is actually a healthy thing for the industry in some ways, right? Like, we need more people to be... You need a Bennett Foddy to say the thing where he gave, like, a GDC talk once, emphasizing why he always puts the name Bennett Foddy into, like, everything very prominently.
Right, and that's it's the classic Atari thing of Activision slapping their name on, and, like that's why they left Atari back in the day. Because Atari wasn't crediting the people who made the games.
Yeah, you gotta give actual credit where it's due on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so crucial, and not even just for a business thing. It's like there is just the personal thing of like I don't know if it's just human ego or like latent narcissism, but
Right.
you wanna come away from a work knowing that people know you made part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
that I feel like that's just normal.
I feel like there's a and this was an issue that I don't think is like resolves itself in the social media age easily, um, but like I think people need to find a better balance between the obsession of the auteur, and never mind people using auteur incorrectly broadly, but
Right.
um, let's say obsession with saying this one person made this game versus oh no what actually this game is these things are always made by a team of people and ignore the individuals entirely. And it's like well
Yeah, there has to be the medium in the middle where
right
yeah,
like
these are individual people who each have personalities and have things to contribute.
there's a reason you can like identify like even a films are how many people touch a film, but you can identify directors and writers styles, uh,
Yeah.
and the same thing you would probably like come across in games if you recognize more like oh this feels like or like oh this feels like a game that comes from this studio or like this director. You can trace people forming new studios. People move from studio to studio because their
Right.
games feel the same.
Yeah, I think a huge part of that is so there's two things that I want to highlight there. One is that with regard to like the auteur thing, like a
Yeah.
huge part of what people miss about the auteur thing is that they're not single creators.
Right.
They're people who are good at working with specific people over and over again.
Yes, yeah.
And you can look at the people they've worked with over and over again, and it's very consistent. Kojima gets a lot of guff for being hailed as like the single name, but he is very good about crediting every single person very prominently. If you played Metal Gear Solid 5,
Yeah.
like they have like the crazy amount of opening credits from every single developer very prominently highlighted, like this guy made this level,
Yeah, and
this guy made like this. Yeah,
and he's a guy who works with a lot of the same people too.
yeah. And this is also why I think you see the people who most prominently show up over and over again as like people who gain prominence within big studio machinery for having, I guess, like a thing that people can like glom onto and be like, I understand who this person is. I know who this person is. People who like gain prominence as personalities tend to be writers.
Right.
Because of this, because it's harder to remove that element from the rest of it. It's harder to anonymize writing from everything else, I feel like, in a lot of ways.
And we have less of like the familiarity to recognize like level design, even though you can recognize some parts of like regional level design aesthetics, the classic European platformer that's like a giant open space with a bunch of bullshit.
It's a giant box.
It's a giant box with a bunch of bullshit in it.
Yeah. Yeah, Arrow the Acrobat is the one that comes to mind the most.
Right.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Just a lot of pillars and yeah. Honestly, like Jazz Jackrabbit kind of falls into that, even though it's not European.
But like you find these kind of cross-cultural like influences and like exchanges, and it is. The broader statement of this conversation, people are bad at like recognizing people within games. Aside from like, I mean, the people I see most often online are like also like generally like the people whose job often is to be online. So I see like if you to clump together a lot of like gaming personalities with like largest online followings, a lot of them seem to be like producers and marketing teams, communication leads. um, which are are
It's
people.
games journal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're all people, but they're not the only people out there. And okay, I want to be clear also to a certain extent. Part of this is that the personalities that tend to not be as visible a lot of the time don't really want to be that visible, but they
Yes.
should still be credited as
Right.
such and
Right.
recognized for the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Someone can be recognized widely without producing any content.
right.
I was during the pledge drive. I was joking about all these, bunch of like just the idea that you must produce content to be recognized. Is an absurd little notion, and like, especially when you consider how many people are dead that we still know their work and think about their work, and some of them never even lived in era where they could produce content.
Yeah. The content mill thing, the I have to constantly be making things to be visible
Yes.
is a very new problem,
Right.
frankly.
If I'm not quote
Because
tweeting every discourse, I don't exist.
right, this is the God, frankly, I'm very bad at existing in that world.
Yes.
I find it exhausting to be. I find TikTok exhausting, for example. Like I making videos all the time.
I will never log
Something
on
that
to a TikTok. I will never make a TikTok.
Oh my God.
I have never seen a marketing TikTok. I have never seen a marketing TikTok that did not make me think humanity was a mistake.
And I've needed to do these. I do
Yeah.
a lot of the marketing stuff for D-Cell. I do I run the Blue Sky account, and I run the TikTok a lot of the time, and it's just an exhausting process making videos.
Yeah.
It's just like the amount of work you have to do to get a TikTok done is very similar to the amount of work you have to do like an actual like whole ass into it video.
Yeah.
But there's very little individual return you get back. And so this is why like TikTok kind of leans towards slop most of the time.
Yes.
Is it's much easier to get to the front of the pile if you have a lot of stuff, because the algorithms are incentivized to push people who constantly update, which means if you want to constantly update, the only way to do that is to have no quality filter.
Right. just record as quickly as possible.
Right, exactly.
Just like that kind of like the choppy editing, yelling at a camera with text popping up, or maybe sometimes you're not yelling at a camera, you're yelling at a thing that you're doing with text popping up. I'm just thinking about when I search noodle, I'm looking at these little shorts while I say that of noodle shorts, and it is the combination of people going, just like look at this amazing thing that I made on this thing in these
Right.
YouTube shorts, and it's. I don't, and I refuse to say it's just a generational age thing. I think a lot of this stuff is just not good. like it's just like a very generic kind of like bland editing style of just like hyper fast, and they all look the same. They have no identity to them. So
TikTok tends to be extremely homogenized.
So you just need to churn. It's like you're saying, you need to make a lot of it so you get on the chance that your version of whatever thing gets recognized. I see the same thing with people making meme content, and posting. When I feel like that doesn't suit like thematically a lot of stuff. It's a weird thing where it feels like, oh, I thought this was a serious game, I guess, but then I'll see like meme version. I'm like, oh, I can't tell if I thought this was a serious game, but they're not.
The biggest problem with that, is frequently okay. I actually have no beef with that type of marketing because it exists within the machine of you need to get people to see your thing and pay attention to your thing, and frequently the stuff that travels the best. And this is why if you've seen the D-Cell Blue Sky, you know exactly the kind of thing it is. But like this is why those things exist that way is stuff that travels the farthest is the dumbest stuff.
Yes.
It is the stuff that people like are gawking at and thinking is funny, and it is the memes. Yeah, even if the game itself is being taken very seriously.
Right. I just because I dislike it, but I would never tell someone to not. If someone's like, I'm thinking about marketing, I would never tell them not to do that. I'd be like, no, you actually, you 100% need to do that.
You 100% need to do that if you're trying to make shit and have it travel far on the modern internet. And it sucks that you need to do that.
Right.
Like, we don't exist within. In some ways, it is kind of an outgrowth of a good problem, which is that we don't have the traditional marketing like systems being king anymore.
Yeah.
But within those systems, like, you could do a traditional marketing campaign with no jokes that is just super front facing and have it land. And you can't really do that anymore unless you have $100 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So my heart goes out to every person doing social media who's like, oh God, how can I cram my thing into whatever the meme is today?
Yeah. Oh God, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Yeah.
Like, how can I possibly twist and contort the thing that I made such that it fits into what is popular? It's like, hey, which sometimes results in people making a lot, like spending so much time making extra stuff, you know.
Oh, it is. No, it's super extra work to do the dumbest thing a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it's trying to find like the least amount of effort to get the most amount of stuff is. I mean, I guess that is just kind of the game dev problem. That is like kind of core to how do you get a lot for a little is the constant issue. But it's especially true here where you're doing a lot for not a lot. You're doing like, how do you get a lot for a little is the question, but this is just how do you get a little for a little in real terms.
Yeah, and sometimes when you get a lot, it's like how much of 100,000 retweets of my meme post about my game results in people actually thinking, because you can't put a link to your game in that because it would ruin the virality. So you have to stick it in underneath, like after your meme post is successful, you gotta, hey, check out my thing. And
hey, check out my thing, and then it's like, do people click on that?
It's usually the classic of 100,000 retweets. Check out my game. 2 likes.
Right. Exactly. I think that I mean, it comes back to the first thing of like, when you connect things to a personality, when you connect things to an overall thing, and people know what that thing is, they're more likely to attach to it, or like they understand what the thing is. So because they have a connection with the person behind what it is, they are more likely to be like, oh, I know this person, I get this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna think about the thing you made. All that, I think, kind of just ties itself together. It's really the only thing you got now, because no one can take away from you that you are a person different from other people.
Yes, hopefully.
Hopefully not.
But speaking of things that have been around for a while, rocks. RJ, gotta know, what's your favorite type of rock?
Okay, my favorite type of rock. When I was a kid, my family did road trips, and there was those like very tourist trappy, like little what do you call it? The you ever see the like roadside things in a lot of desert states where they just have a ton of geodes and rocks and stuff?
Not as a lifelong New Englander, unfamiliar with desert states, but I understand.
Fair enough.
I understand this roadside shop that just has stuff in it.
It just has stuff in it, and in this context, it's just rocks.
Yeah.
Often they may or may not be. They don't actually have to be attached to like a pan for fool's gold kind of thing where they just have a ton of pyrite.
Yeah.
But the I guess the answer to the question is I always like just running my hands through those as a kid, and there was like a polished I want to say it was amethyst specifically, like
Okay.
that I really liked. Yeah, I think amethyst. Does that count as a rock? Amethyst is more of a mineral.
Yes, I
than a
believe
rock.
I've looked this up before, and gems count as rocks.
Okay.
They are types of
Then
rocks.
yeah, I think amethyst is my answer.
Perfect. And secondary question: do you have a favorite Toho character?
Oh my gosh. Okay. You know what? I don't know what's her name. The one. I don't know the names of the Toho characters. Now I'm gonna look up the Toho characters.
What's the aesthetic of the Toho?
The one that I think is the best character based on the vibe is it's Remilia Scarlet.
Okay,
is the one
yes.
that has the best aesthetic, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm a long-term fan of that whole general Scarlet Devil mention.
Yeah, I've actually so I've never played a Toho game, it's a huge blind spot for me actually.
Yeah.
Mostly because I am not a shmup guy most of the time. I am gonna try to play Zero Ranger because I quite liked Void Stranger, and so that might be an inroad for me. But I like a lot of the Toho music.
Yes.
Like Flowering Night is a really good track that I'm a big fan of. It was a huge amount of the music is really good.
Yeah, if you are ever in a arcade and you want to try a new rhythm game, but you want to play a song that you know, it helps to know Bad Apple because it's pretty much on every single.
Bad Apple. Bad Apple is just like the Doom for videos.
Yes.
Now, right.
Yeah.
That is probably the cultural thing for Toho that most people would recognize.
Yeah, it is, and even if they have no idea quite what it is, like, oh, it's that online video. It's that the closest they get is to go, oh, it's that anime video, where they kind of nail country of origin, but like,
yeah,
it's just like an internet. You're right. It's like Doom. It's the thing people make on everything.
They just put it on everything. They see if what can be you make a video on or in or using, and you do Bad Apple with that thing.
Yeah.
There's some really crazy ones. The one that like I think is the most notable recently that I saw was someone did Bad Apple entirely using the YouTube subtitle system.
Okay.
So it's just a blank video. But when you turn subtitles on, it's an accurate, like frame to frame to frame, running like ASCII with the whole thing. It's completely nuts.
Yes,
you need to find that one again.
I checked. I double checked because it's not something surprisingly, it's not something I've actually looked up. But there is a Doom WOD that is Bad Apple.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Unfortunately, Bad Apple is not an engine, so you cannot make Doom within Bad Apple. So Bad Apple is the winner there, given that's a music
Bad
video.
Apple is, Bad Apple can be put on more things.
Yes, because it can be placed inside of Doom. But anyway, RJ, we're gonna go on a break here.
Okay.
Thank you for joining me. We are going to there it is, found Fubar. We'll be back in about 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Goodbye for now. Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was RJ Lake again with just a little longer / Bass Reeves Can't Die. We had an extra long break because you were saying secret things. During sometimes you get a little spicier on the show, and then you go, you don't say that in recorded spaces where you can't have nuanced conversations. RJ Lake, Fran Levy, welcome back to the show. I feel like there's a lot of statements when I think if I can to put this in and try to coin a phrase or try to sum them up, I think like response necessary statements or like conversational statements, if that makes sense, of like something you can't just throw out as an errant post because there's a lot more complicated nuance to something, and also sometimes the internet also has problem with things that are good and bad simultaneously and not grasping that concept.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think nuance in general, it's not a new statement to say that
Yes.
nuance is something that does not travel well on the internet.
Right.
I mean, I think that's why podcasts have become so popular, right? Is because it does give people a chance to have a conversation, right? And
yes, right. Of somebody to say something, and someone go, wait, what? And the person instead of having 30 people shout at them immediately, go, oh wait, no, I go, oh wait, no, you're right, I phrased that poorly, or I said something off the cuff, and you're right, that was not actually you're right.
Or they can double down and
Yes.
be real, get real weird with it.
Right.
That's always fun.
Yes, right. The double down instantly of, actually, I was right, and I can never be wrong.
Actually, I was right the first time, and here's why you're wrong is my favorite variant of that.
The endless necessity to make sure that we are always either correct or incorrect, and somebody else is. It's part of the
Zero Summit, baby.
It's part of that whole second conversation. It's like, people are just people, also.
Yeah.
Not abstract concepts or like a representation of a broader idea. We're not all Wikipedia pages, or whatever. But anyway, video games. What a wild thing those are. I'm looking at a bunch of them right now. On the itch.io homepage. There is something I wish. I think we were talking about this during the break. That is one of the things that can escape the break, which is that a lot of people included with it, Indiepocalypse, mentioned that this was the first time they ever got paid for games being included. And something I occasionally wish, but I'm terrified of it having, is like a Bandcamp style scroll on the itch front page of like, here's games people are buying, and like, would that be
that? Yeah, though I think that would be good. I think that would be good. That would be edifying.
Yes.
Honestly, the thing. So, there is a weird. It's like an avalanche effect that you get, where when people see that people have paid money for video games, or no, in Bandcamp's context, like let's use that. That's a very useful example. There's that big banner that says how much money Bandcamp has made for creators over the course of Bandcamp. It's like $1 billion.
Right, in the last year is what they'll say. Yeah.
And that I think is very useful for being like, this isn't just an empty thing. Like, there's a weird psychology there where audiences writ large are more likely to put money into a thing if they see that other people are doing so. This is why the GDQ donations like have an exponential ramp over the course of the week.
Right. It's why Kickstarter or crowdfunding is so important in that their very beginning and the very end.
Yeah.
Because that's 100%. When things snowball the most.
Yep.
And
yeah, absolutely.
Do you think having paid stuff like being more prominently featured on itch and having that part part of like what itch is about and the sort of expectation of itch like change the audience at all though? Like when I'm paying for a game, right, rightly or wrongly, there I do have sort of certain expectations of what the game will have and what it will do, right? If it has bugs or if it has a settings menu, and I'm wondering how much of the sort of free spirits of a lot of the games on itch might be corrupted by that in some way, you know?
Yeah, and I think that I'm trying. I want to. I'm trying to hit the Bandcamp feed to see if, because I bet I could hit one of these that's just like pay what you want. A lot of Bandcamp stuff.
Yeah,
is
of course.
Pay what you want in the same way that Itch is. But Itch also has like more. It's kind of like it's has like you run to it that where it's like the everything site. Where it's student projects, it's like very incomplete stuff. It's like it's just kind of it is everything that is not Steam.
I think actually, I think that the contrary answer, or like not the contrary,
Yeah.
the counterfactual to this is the fact that Steam has free games, and
Right.
I don't think that Steam having free games changes the expectation of what games are on Steam at all.
No, yeah, and
Yeah.
and people
like
are just
you.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like they now have a trending free tab because it has become a recent thing to put a game up on Steam for free. That's like an advertisement for another game. This is a thing I have done myself.
Right.
Or like to use there was the one thing Content Warning did recently where for 24 hours the game was free the first day it launched.
Yeah.
And so like a ton of people got the game right away. And it blew up, and then it was at the top of the charts right before it went for pay. And so they changed the trending feed to like they added that feed to kind of help like stem the bleeding there because it was like just all free games were taking up the new and trending. But I don't think that those existing there actually changed what people were expecting from Steam games. They just made the algorithmic like recommendations feed different, which is, I mean, that's its own discussion. But
that is interesting that you say that because we recently made one of our games free, Horde, that had been sold for a couple of dollars for years, and we actually started getting more negative reviews.
Interesting. Oh, that's so weird.
Because I think it was just like going out to that sort of wider audience, and they were still going into it with sort of Steam audience expectations of this was a very early project for us that didn't really have a good settings menu or doesn't scale to different resolutions, right? And I think that sort of more expectant audience, right, that you get from Steam versus itch. So yeah, maybe just promoting it more paid stuff on itch wouldn't necessarily change the underlying culture because it's already sort of been established.
And I think their feature is like a good mix of paid versus freeware stuff, if on their featured selection, and then Fresh, which is like algorithmic driven or whatever, is primarily free stuff, because it's the free place, and free stuff is also, it's like very nice when something is free because you don't have to pay money for it.
It's primarily free stuff and primarily web playable.
Yes.
For that reason, yeah.
Right. You don't have to download anything. You just log it up. You just put it up and play it. Which is like I don't want to go away. That is like there's that infinite balance between like people. I just want to my larger goal of this project. I want people to, if somebody wants to put up like their 20-minute game for a few bucks, for it not to be like get backlash for, why am I paying for a 20-minute game, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
More for the option to exist, not for it to become the norm that, of course all games should cost money. He's like, no, I mean, people.
I mean, a good argument.
Yeah.
A good argument just for having, itch promoting more paid stuff for me, I think, is like, I don't really know, how itch operates, but I do worry sometimes about how they keep the lights on. over there.
Right.
There's a lot of content they're hosting for free, and you see scary stuff happen to them, like Funko, that Funko
Yeah.
AI takedown thing that happened a few weeks ago, and I'm like, geez, it feels precarious sometimes, and I'm worried that they aren't actually getting enough revenue from what they do.
No, that's I mean,
Well, because they're not leeching 30% by default, so they are.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? You can sell something on there and set that itch, percentage to zero, and they'll have nothing for even though they're selling your game on their platform. So yeah, it's an admirable business model, I have to say, but it does make me worry sometimes.
right, right, because it's the fear of like, oh, this disappears. What happens to like everything? Does it, does it just vanish? What happens to all these? I mean, that's why I tell people, hey, I was saying, hey, get your own website. It's very easy to get a website and put zip files on it. Um,
Mm.
which maybe a lot of people will not visit that website. I have, even though I have like a permanent sale and everything on my own website, most people buy things through itch because that's like people like marketplaces. People are
Yeah,
they get obsessed with
People.
like place so much value on the idea, even between marketplaces. How much importance is placed upon that $100 Steam submission fee when something might be on itch anyway.
It's weird because I can feel it in my own brain, the psychological pull for something to feel more real when it's on a Steam account
Yeah.
versus being a zip file on my downloads folder. Um, and that is just, there's like a tangibility factor of like how it's displayed to you,
Yeah.
uh, that I think changes that. It is a bizarre thing. Like there's no difference. At the end of the day, it's a game. I open the game, I play the game, um, and having like a bunch of zip folders uh, is something that did a lot when I was a kid. I had a lot of
Yeah.
games that I just downloaded. Don't do that much anymore. And maybe this is just like a symptom of like everything is more complicated. So the simpler something is, the easier it is to just not think about.
Right. It's the
But
appification of like all PC platforms.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
and
have
I think
my.
people.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Andrew. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, no. If you're ever talking, I'm ever talking. Just talk right through me.
I was just saying. I think it also leads into like people love keeping track of stuff these days, right? Like
Yeah,
everyone has a letterbox account where they're
Backlogged,
tracking their
yeah.
yeah.
yeah their Spotify playlists, where they're categorizing everything. I think Steam, having a Steam library, plays into that for sure.
Right, right. And it is like I just double checked my legacy folder of indie games. That's currently sitting at 1,200 folders. Almost 50 gigs of files. That it's just from probably decades ago. Of oh yeah, here 2000. Let me see my oldest date modified on these. Um, 2010 at least. Um,
Wow.
I've got like these old zip files, and that's assuming that's less modified. Who knows? Who knows when beyond that? When the games came from. But it is like different eras. Like I was of an era where, you know, I guess you didn't think of Newgrounds as indie games, but it was, it is. Um,
Oh yeah, no, that like it cultivated a whole artistic movement basically.
yeah,
Like Newgrounds is the entire reason that modern Western animation exists, kind of
yeah,
in many ways, in like indie circles at least.
right,
Outside of like because you don't have those creators, then you don't have most of the impetus towards modern web animation. Uh, like it, that is absolutely an independent scene, and there's a lot of games that came out of that.
Yeah.
Outside of the ones that people think about, like there's a lot of games that came out of that.
We just didn't have that same like, the same marketable quote unquote marketable version of indie game didn't exist back then in the same way.
Yeah.
So this is pre Xbox Live Summer of Arcade, quote unquote indie game the movie. Is that
Yes.
is that the turning point in the marketable indie Turner phrase? Is it like indie game the movie and Summer of Arcade, all those guys?
I mean, it's definitely XBLA was, I think, the first big thing. So I think XBLA comes before Indie Game the movie, of course.
Right, because all those guys are like those
like
first Summer of Arcade guys primarily.
the only one, I mean, the only one that came after was Fez.
Yeah.
I think that definitely, to some extent, was the turning point for sure. Was XBLA and those games coming out and being like such a big thing, because you see the numbers done by Super Meat Boy. Suddenly you're thinking about how you're selling games in a different way if you're
Right.
like a platform creator, like Xbox.
Yeah.
So
And you're like, oh, we can host these very small games on our site and make a bunch of money. And then
it changes the conversation.
right, and then it warps also like from the creator standpoint of like, well, I can be Super Meat Boy, ignoring that you get like huge promotion from like one of the largest platform holders in the world. Kind of may or may not play a small part in that,
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I
think also
yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I think also early games on Steam that were not put out by Valve fit this bill, right? Like all the Introversion Soft stuff, right? Like that was like all definitely in the same. It's not the same stuff we think about, but like Darwinia, Multiwinia,
Yes.
all of those definitely fit this bill.
And those are also early Humble Bundle pack stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Basically stuff that was early before a lot of all these different spaces became very businessified. Now Humble is just a storefront also.
And isn't even a games publisher.
Right. Well, they were for a little while, I think. Right.
Yeah.
For
They were for a while, and then they closed the division without telling anyone.
yes.
Well, geez. That's not great.
Right. All right. I mean, they're also owned by Ziff Davis. What a.
Yep.
Well, because it was originally who was Wolffire. Yeah, Wolffire was originally the people running Humble, and Ziff Davis much different from the people who were making Lagaru.
Yeah.
Do indie folks nowadays know about Lagaru?
To be honest, I haven't heard of it. Actually.
Oh,
I mean, Overgrowth, right?
Sure. Yeah. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like basically the sequel, or not really a sequel, but it's like the follow up to Lugaru.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I think is it the same universe?
I mean, probably. This looks too clean and there's too many shaders on this thing. Get him out of here. I want like fucking a rabbit running at like 10,000 miles an hour. And like jump kicking across a mostly featureless plane.
Oh my god.
That is like I've been kind of like divorced from the modern game releases for like a little while, aside of because I get a lot of them just through my curation work. I feel like I'm kind of still tapped into people making games in the year 2024.
Yeah.
But and part of it makes me think like, man, people really ought to just kind of like not always play new, like need to go back and play a lot of like older stuff still.
It's just how the way these games spread, right? Like as soon as something, it's like that, what you guys were discussing in the previous segment of the constant content treadmill, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the new stuff that's being released, and it's very difficult to get traction on anything that's, old,
Right.
really.
And the like, every art form that's ever existed will show you that the long arc of history does not trend towards the highest selling things,
No.
But it's also very hard to tell someone that, oh no, your work will be really respected and like do really well 15 years from now. And
Yeah, and also I think you look at the long arc. I do not say this to be a huge downer, but
Yeah.
I also think like the long arc of history does not include the internet, which is a space where things just fall off the
Yes.
map, right? So there's like a mix of, you want to make sure your stuff is visible, even if it doesn't sell well. You still want to make sure it's visible. It needs to be out there, and it needs
Right.
to not just disappear.
Right.
Because stuff can just disappear on the internet.
It is it is funny listening to like I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts and people talking about the idea of that, like regretting that these like Kia ads or whatever that they did for Funny or Die would last forever, and now when they need them for something they don't exist anymore. Like
Yeah.
like all these like weird stuff that just was like, oh god, I can't believe that's gonna live on the internet forever. Actually doesn't live on the internet forever. And it's like, oh, actually 5 years I spent doing work no longer exists. It simply is gone.
Right. The fucking like Vice thing, like where everyone at Vice was immediately met with the terrifying reality that, oh, all of the work I wrote for this website might just stop existing. I don't think that it actually got taken offline, but there was like an existential conversation about that.
Game
the
Informer.
second that Vice, Game Informer was a huge example of this. Oh my god!
It is still just a static web page.
Oh my god. And it's the worst. It's like trying to archive this shit for the one person who's going to look through it to make a video about it that doesn't include everything.
Right.
It's an existential nightmare, but it's important stuff to do because archival work is important.
Right. And people wonder why, game discussions never seem to progress ever, and it's because they get deleted every 2 years. So you have no and all the people who initially had these conversations 2 years ago got burned out of the industry. So it's just a bunch of people starting fresh talking about, well, what if we put paint on everything?
Yeah, that's a big issue, right? It's just the churn of game creators is insane. I feel compared to other mediums, right? There's very little. It's gotten slightly better, but even just the last 2 years, the amount of layoffs, it's
and
concerning.
And the thing that I think about a lot, unsurprisingly, is that I feel like there's no indie space to catch someone in between jobs in the same way. Because it is that thing where it's like, the itch game, you make $0. So you came like, oh, okay, well, I'm in between jobs. I can still make little games and go to cons and have some kind of income, from practicing my art. Instead, it's like, oh, you either have a job or make zero money from games. No in between.
And I feel like the indie publishing scene as well. Like it's difficult to even find a publisher, right? They want a vertical slice. They want a prototype that's
right. They want your game that's already 2 years in development.
Yeah.
No, or in my case, it was 4 years in development,
right?
And then a Kickstarter, and then we got publishers to reach out to us after all of that. Like it again, I don't say this to be disheartening because I think that I was on a podcast recently talking about this exact same thing about this industry is horrible, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But also, and the takeaway is if you're the kind of person who hears all this shit sucks and you still want to do it, then you should still do it.
Yeah.
It's just you should know getting into it how hard it is beforehand, because then you're going to come at it with a much better set of tools and a set of preparations to go into things. Like, if you have a good vertical slice, you are much more likely to get publishing support. But you should not have to have a good vertical slice
Right,
to do
yes.
it sucks that is a requirement.
Yeah.
It means that people who have free time are likely to do things, and that people who don't aren't able to get into the industry.
Yes, yeah, no, I wish I'm gonna blank on the exact phrasing of it, but I saw Stuff Wombat post some point last year of the idea of the industry is in the indie space is defined by people who can afford it to fail multiple times.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Who can oh yeah, well that didn't do well. Oh well, I can still make another one. Not like, okay, well that didn't. I spent 7 years making something. It didn't do well. I can't afford to do that again.
This is part of why I harp on this all the time. And I say this with no shade to anyone, especially not people in the room.
Right.
But fuck solo development as a thing.
Yeah.
Because if you're with multiple people, you're more able to fail. If you're not just alone. I don't think that solo development is a bad thing, but I think that if you're not able to do that, it can be really disheartening. And I think people think a lot of the time, because of the way that indie space conversations have gone, that solo development is the only thing that you should be focusing on if you want to get into the industry. And it isn't.
No,
and I think that anyone who is developing games in a solo space would say the same, but I don't think that that's an obvious thing to a lot of people outside of the industry.
Yeah, and I think it's there's very different scales of I think it's something that works really well. I think within the hobbyist, within the freeware space.
Yeah,
but if you're someone who's oh, I want to get into I want making games to be my job. One, that will take a very long time. Two, there's a good chance that all those quote unquote solo developers you see play their games and wait till the credits scroll. I bet you will not see only one name in those credits there.
I guess that's the thing, though, right? Is that we do sort of mythologize the solo developer so much.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah, that's why I say fuck solo development.
Yeah.
Not as a manage of saying that people who develop games by themselves are bad, but you should not be valorizing the idea of making a game by yourself, because all that does is make people think that if they're not doing a game by themselves, they aren't real, or they're not
right.
Yeah.
I think the same thing with reusing your work, reusing assets, getting store-bought, whatever gets the game made.
That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Is the asset flip, such a common term, right?
I think imagine, the obvious example. It's at one point do you stop not create the universe and just make your game,
yeah.
If if I can't buy assets, do I need to should I make my own engine? Should I make my own computer? Should I make my own semiconductors? At what point do you realize, you don't need to make it? You don't need to make everything yourself.
Right. To be clear, there is nothing wrong with wanting to do that. I am someone who is extremely when it comes to music creation, for example. I'm really annoying about trying to do as much stuff by myself as possible.
Yes.
So I don't use any synth presets by default. I don't use I am trying to change every sound I make so that I am putting my own spin on it. I don't think that people who don't do that are bad.
Yes.
Right?
No. I think the thing that people that sometimes gets the most loss is people can do things differently than each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And have really strong different takes on something, and you don't need to convince that one person. I think an art form is made healthier by there being people that have extremely strong opinions that differ from each other. That's how you avoid not everybody making the same thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And
I mean, on the point of this sort of try and finding a team if you can. I don't know if we as sort of an indie dev community do enough though to help people find collaborators. I think it can be quite difficult if you are just starting learning game development or want to get into it. It can be quite intimidating finding those other people, right? Do you have the skill set that's good enough for them? How do you, because you've got to trust someone quite a lot to collaborate.
There's so much trust,
right?
and if you're the kind of person who's good at finding a team, chances are you're also the person who has had a lot of bad teams in the past before that point.
Yeah.
Like it happened to me. Like I did not. D-Cell is a good group that I'm very happy and feel very lucky to have helped form. It is not the first time I've tried doing this.
All right.
Like by any stretch of the imagination. And I think, I guess it comes back to the thing of like, as Stuffed Wombat said, like indie development is full of people who are able to fail multiple times.
Yeah.
A part of being able to fail multiple times is the mental fortitude of the thing. It's like I am not disheartened by the fact that the team I was with, stopped talking and didn't do anything, and now I am left alone to do something else. Like I'm not disheartened by that. I'm gonna keep moving on and try to do something else. Is a hard thing for someone to feel.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to just be like, well, this is useless now.
Right. Right. And it's like, oh, especially if that happens like years in.
Yes. Yeah.
And everything had public visibility too.
Oh, that's even worse. Oh God, if there's public drama around a Fallout, that can be a nightmare. God, no. The amount of times that there's been small, like weird public dramas in the indie game scene is about as much as any other creative scene.
Yes.
Which,
That's the if you find any scene and you'll find a dramaless scene, I dare you.
There isn't. Even the ones you'd think, like, I'm pretty sure that there's, like, drama within, like, people who do knitting.
Yes,
probably. Right. Like, I haven't seen it, but I guarantee you there is if you look for it.
Sure, yeah.
You find people who care about a thing, they're passionate, they're going to have opinions, and opinions are going to clash with other people.
Right.
I think the big thing with, like, trying to find people, trying to find a team, trying to, like... We as a creative group of people, the indie games community, do not socialize normally, and that's a problem for this.
Right.
Yeah.
Part of it is definitely we're not all in the same space.
Yeah.
Like
both physical and also like artistically, we're not all in the same space. But like. It sucks because the answer that most people would give is, well, just go to like local scene stuff or go to conventions.
Yeah.
Which, you can socialize very easily if you are lucky enough to be at a MagFest or a GDC or a PAX. But that's not everyone. That's you're self-selecting immediately.
Right.
And there's going to be people out there who are good at things that you would probably have a good rapport with that you're never going to meet or never interact with because of that self-selection in general.
Yeah, and even if you go into like just local meetups, sometimes you're like, is it the right vibe? So much of like online argument about games is like a bunch of people who are technically all making games, but are so different from each other in like the styles of games and their philosophy on games, but it all gets crammed into this one weird little box called video games. That is like in some that are like sometimes like functionally incompatible with each other, and you have to like hope that I spent all this money to go to a GDC or something. Hopefully there are people like that who think like me there, and like, oops, there are not. So I actually did not.
There are. You gained nothing.
Right. I am blessed that I will probably never even think about going to GDC in my entire life. And it's like, oh no, that is just not a thing. That's for companies. I'm not a company. I don't have to worry about that.
I mean, you could hang out with me.
I could, but there are other. I'm more likely, I go to I go to other events, also events where I can sell things. So like, I'll come across those people at like a MagFest or like maybe a PAX. Also, those events close to me on the East Coast.
Right, of course. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
MagFest is not close to me, but I have gone there every year.
Yes.
Because of unbeatable stuff.
I'm trying to find a way to. I am a weird edge case where like I'm not quite the same thing as like people in like as a vendor selling like Mario stuff or whatever, but not quite in indie dev in the same space. So it's like, where's this weird little awkward in between?
Yeah,
space?
I mean, honestly, I'm okay. If I was in your shoes, I would submit to Mivs maybe or like try to talk to them about the like.
Technically, I have talked to.
You could be a publisher-ish.
You cannot. And actually, it's weirdly at an event I was talking to someone who did like Mivs and MagFest stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, we don't know what to do with you."
Yeah, that's so weird. That sucks because you're not a publisher, but I think for the purpose of an event, I would treat you as one because of the way that you can like collect a bunch of things into one booth and like do like kind of an indie mega booth sort of thing.
Right.
I think that would be very effective and really good at showing a lot of stuff off that would not get shown otherwise.
I'm a thing that exists heavily in a lot of other mediums. I am holding a little mini zine here that I got from Mice for a group called Go Press Girl, which is like another indie comic publisher. Indie record labels. It's stuff that exists like.
Yeah, no, SPX is like full of things like Indiepocalypse.
Yeah, right. It is thriving in industries that are not video games. So but in video games, it's an awkward like, what's their phrase? Locally sourced out in Michigan has done a couple anthologies. 10MG kind of works in the same space.
Oh right, yeah. 10MG.
Yeah.
I was saying to you like it's 10MG, it's you, it's DreadX as like the kind of that's it as far as the big name ones.
Right. And then there are other little ones like Cartomancy had their release, and there was other ones.
Like Haunted PS1 kind of counts, maybe.
Right, but there's so many people in there that they don't do money stuff because.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it'd be too complicated.
Yeah, because it's very community and that's good because I mean, Haunted PS1 thrives so long because they're like, if you injected money into Haunted PS1, I don't think it would still be around.
I mean, it would be something close to DreadX, but DreadX is smaller for a reason.
Right, and it's good that it's better to have a Haunted PS1 to DreadX pipeline than to try to.
I agree. Yeah, 100%.
Than to try to make money out of Haunted PS1.
For sure. It's such a hard, weird thing to make paid anthology work in the game space. And it's true. Like, there's films that have been doing. VHS has been doing this for years.
Yeah.
Very effectively. It is weird that we haven't, like, as an industry, really figured this part of it out.
Yeah.
Because it's a good middle ground.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's you mentioned SPX, and there's also like there are zero game events that are like SPX.
No, that's. I think the closest is like Bitbash, maybe.
Yeah. But like generally, there's no like there game events are like preview events, not marketplaces.
Yeah.
And that drastically changes like the kind of it's this cascading effect of like.
Yeah, like I mentioned Bitbash, but Bitbash is like presented like a gallery show,
right?
And
it's a thing I think about a lot because like if all your games are preview events, the people who show up are the people who can afford to spend that money on advertising, and it kind of like it's a self replicating system. But if like
self-selecting,
yeah. But if Bitbash or if say for instance there were like different like SPXs or Cakes or similar like indie game marketplaces for people who make like small no budget games and like audiences that were like I've gone to Mice, my local Massachusetts equivalent of an indie comic show, and people there are like ravenous. They are buying tons of stuff, and these are all like, small
How
self.
much? How much do you think that's because there's like a physical component to
That
what
is
they're
definitely
selling?
a portion of it, yes, and I would
Yeah.
encourage people to make physical components of their. It's very cheap to do so.
Mm.
I would also say the same. Like, this is why D-Cell has harped. We do not make much money on doing it. I think
Yeah.
we barely break even, but we focus so much on making really high quality T-shirts and like CDs and things to sell at MagFest,
Yeah,
because it is such a good thing to like connect people to what you're doing if you give them something that is like, okay, here's a perfect example. This is not something that D-Cell made, so
right.
I feel better talking about it. There's this game called A Shot in the Dark
Yeah.
that I never would have known about. That it was at MagFest. I never would have known about it if it wasn't for the fact that they had their game at MagFest and they were selling this custom-made woodcut, like the physical copy of the game was a woodcut like linograph of the pixel art from the game, like a gorgeous like bespoke
Yeah.
piece, like laser
Nice.
cut. That is such a. Let me. I gotta try to find it. Like, I'm gonna get a picture because I have it like displayed up here. But that I would never have played this game ever outside of like the fact that I went around and played all the games at MagFest.
Yes.
But I never would have played this game. I would have never have bought the game if it wasn't for the fact that there was this tiny little woodcut there, because it was such a cool little thing that I hadn't seen someone do, and that made it just an intrinsically different thing from just I'm gonna buy a $10 game on Steam.
Right. I'm able to sell a lot of weird shit to people sight unseen because I have a neat little packaging,
Yeah, exactly. This is 100% like the thing. Cool objects and doing cool things with the objects. That is important. I care so much about, and maybe very few other people do, but I think that like that effort of caring about the thing does come through to people, even if they don't care about the things the same way you do. I care so much about like if you're using a physical media to transfer something, to like display something, you should be leaning really hard into the quirks of the media you're using. So like on CD, for example, like I care a lot about trying to do stuff with pre-gapping. So if you know anything about Redbook Audio CD standard, I've lost everyone who's listening to the podcast.
That's the important part.
Yeah, no. If you know anything about Redbook Audio CD standard, you know that it is separated into audio that is played like for the actual like listening of the thing, and then there's like what are called pre-gaps, which are like the little 1 second bits between the tracks. The way that the actual audio is held on the CD is just in one large wave file, basically, more or less. It's PCM audio.
Yeah.
Which means that all of the pre-gap to track things is fake. It's just a marker on the disc. And what that means is that the pre-gap and the track can be listed as whatever, such that you can put a track before track 1 that's only heard if you rewind the CD.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Like there's that's stuff you can do with a CD that does not exist on other media. Like you can't do that with another thing, but you can do that with a CD because like it just allows for that. And if you lean into the quirks of the things that you're working with, I think people notice that kind of effort, the kind of like playfulness, and that's the kind of stuff that you just can't do if you're just putting a game out there. I think that although that effort feels like a lot, it's actually not that much effort to set up relative to the effect you get from having that stuff out there and having that be it's just a cool object. I think, and that there's something.
Maybe that's a way of like approaching the sort of anthology problem as well, right? Andrew, you're doing that with the the cassette tapes, but there's Super Rare. They do a mixtape as well, collecting indie games.
Yes, R.I.P.
Yeah,
Super Rare mixtape.
more. Yeah, that might be a way to get more eyeballs on it as well, and get these anthologies
Yeah,
spread.
the problem, the one mistake they made was they made it look too nice,
Right.
which meant it cost too much money to make. They're like, you gotta. My philosophy is like, I am that guy. I'm your local band. At like your local restaurant playing music, and I've got, my thing burned on the shittiest CD in a jewel case.
You say that,
yeah,
but I mean, the art you get for the Indiepocalypse covers is really good always, and it's like,
yes.
I don't know, what was the one that I really like a lot of the art for them, but what's the one that I'm thinking of specifically? I'm scrolling through the Indiepocalypse things until I see it.
Okay.
So 38's one of the ones I'm thinking about that has just an incredibly good well-drawn cover.
Absolutely.
The one I was thinking of specifically that I think is a counterfactual to you saying you have the shittiest thing.
Packaging.
Indiepocalypse 20. Yeah, Indiepocalypse 24 just looks incredible. It's got the really good art you got from Yato. The package here is just so attractive and has,
I am only talking about that Super Rare got really cool cassette shaped USB sticks,
that's cool. Yeah, that stuff is cool, but that's hard to do,
right? And
you can really only do that if you're working with a bigger manufacturer process.
And
if you are. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, people have linked me those oh yeah, Andrew, you know they make these things. I'm like, yeah. Also, they cost they come from England and they cost £2 per. When I'm or £5 per or something ridiculous like that. I'm like, I get these things dirt cheap off AliExpress for maybe $1 a piece.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're totally good to do that.
And it works
I think that more DIY aesthetic appeals anyway to certain audience, right?
And it's how I'm able to make 1,000 of them. I think I've probably come close to selling around 1,000 of them total. Of these things kind of floating around the world now. And that's also the handy thing about it's an unbeatable shirt is something somebody wears around, but it's also it's also in theory something that gets passed around. It's in theory something any piece of clothes. It just exists until it gets destroyed. So you can find them in a Goodwill one day when someone's I'm done with my gamer shirts, and it's just still a object that exists in the world,
Exactly.
And it's you make something that just kind of spreads around forever versus you're saying the impermanence of the internet of how long does a post last? 3 days maybe, if you're lucky. 20 seconds.
Yeah. We've got to start printing Vice articles onto T-shirts.
Yes.
From the sounds of it.
Right. That's
honestly, I would buy a T-shirt with some Vice articles printed. I'd wear that.
People need to it's a thing. I think it's just one of the unfortunate things of selling stuff in a way preserves it.
This is that statement. Selling stuff in a way preserves it. I think is getting to the core of the thing I was talking about. Writ large, earlier. I think. It is the weirdest, unfortunate quirk of living in a society that's transactional.
Yes.
But the second you put a $sign on the thing, you have immortalized it way more than by just giving it away for free.
Right. It's this curse of capitalism, of people place the idea of how much stuff exists on the Internet Archive, that nobody ever touches. And it's
psychologically, we just, of course it's more valuable because they're charging me money for it, right?
Right.
So
it comes in a pretty little package.
Yeah.
So of course I versus like I could get this on the Internet Archive or somewhere else, and it's the problem with game history in that nobody fucking sell like. It's you hate to say that the Ouya was right, but sometimes the Ouya was right. We need it's not maybe there should be like this Android box that just kind of plays shit. It's just like there ought to be cheap emulator boxes like we have Blu-ray players, and then
I think the biggest problem is there are cheap emulator boxes that are very easily available, and all that they're used for, or like the way that they're marketed, is just here's a bunch of games that were already everyone knows about.
Yes.
That
you can play Ocarina of Time again. Like
you can play Ocarina of Time. You can play Mario 3 for the 50th time in your life.
Or here's 50,000 games.
Here's every single ROM from the Sega Genesis. Available at your fingertips right now. You're not going to play any of them.
Yeah,
but you could in theory.
It's that weirdness of like something getting a physical release like puts it back inside of conversation. Of like, if someone's like, oh hey, you hear there's a new Tulip release coming out, and suddenly people are thinking about Tulip again.
I mean, I'm always thinking about Tulip. There isn't a new Tulip release. If you just said those words and got my brain excited for no reason.
Let me double check, because I said this like a couple of weeks ago. I was talking about what was I talking about? Lunar. I was talking about Lunar, and it turned out there was a new Lunar release coming out like this year.
Oh my god.
No, because Tulip is like Onion, and Onion is, or what is it? They're really
Tulip is Punchline. Punchline is originally Lovedelic.
Which is now
Onion Soft.
Which is now Onion Soft, and is like, and that is like Moon Remix. That was like, let me see, Inspired to Localize. Okay, no, it wasn't. Toby Fox played Inspiration, but it wasn't like the classic of like, you see a lot of directors being like, I love this movie, I'm going to bring it back to the market or whatever. It was not strictly Toby Fox saying, I love Moon, I'm going to fund it coming back.
No, I think Tim Rogers had something. No, Tim Rogers did the translation for Moon into English.
Right. And so much of there's like so much of that goes, the invisible people of this, if you're deep into like reading a bunch of manga, you'll see the name Ryan Holmberg a lot. Because he's got just they're the people who are doing the work to bring and sell all this stuff out, and bring it back into like public consciousness of like how many people Moon is easily accessible through a million emulator sites and like ROM sites, but how many people came to it because of the re-release?
Tons. I think Yoshihiro. I'm pronouncing a man's name terribly.
Yes.
Not even because I'm bad at pronouncing it. I'm just stripping over my words. Yoshihiro Kimura is the guy who I think is kind of in charge of Onion Soft.
Yeah.
And it is wild how much his work has influenced the industry without people ever really realizing that.
Yes.
Just through stuff that game developers have played.
Right. This is me thinking about how there are now two top game lists curated by experts, quote unquote, that don't include, I think, a lot of things, but I think most often like Yume Nikki, which is,
oh my god, if Yume Nikki isn't on a list of most influential games, you were immediately disqualified.
Right.
Like Yume Nikki and Cave Story, the two that have they're like the pillars that the indie games scene is standing on top of.
Yes, right. Yeah, we are so far in that we are seeing like those are games that are influenced by influence by influence, and they're like these like pillars, right? Like you said,
it's like those two, and then it's like Toho, and then it's Higurashi, right?
Yeah.
Are like those four things holding together. And there's so many branches off of those.
But if you look at now, GQ did one a while ago. Rolling Stone just put one out, and these are curated by experts kind of things, none of those things you mentioned appear on either of those.
Ugh.
And it's a thing that I think like why I think like games just need to like step back and like really I think for the health of the medium, everybody needs to stop playing new releases for like 2 years, and and all the people working on, and then everyone, and then they need to go play, need to fucking play Higurashi, need to sit down with Tower of Jiraga, even if they never beat it. They need to like play like
play Baroque.
Right. How many people have played like the old Apple version of The Prisoner? You know, like these. Anyway, it's you know, imagine any other medium that had the same like lifespan of like games. You know, where like stuff like older works went like so heavily ignored by like the theoretical like critical and like you know the vocal developer space. Like this is not even like GameFAQs pick these lists, you know. These are like critics and studio heads, contemporary.
Yeah.
But whatever.
It's just the games industry just feels so like the whole culture of it has been around like the commercial aspect of it.
Yes.
Since its inception in a way that I feel like the other mediums haven't necessarily, and that could explain it. But yeah, it is staggering.
Every time people talk about Zelda, I feel the way that I know a lot of people do when people talk about Harry Potter. It's
right.
like the you know, the read another book thing of I get it. I understand that Zelda there's good Zelda. I like Zelda. Even.
Yes.
I like Zelda. Please play something else.
I think sometimes that like it's funny, you know, classic game hater Roger Ebert is still like a million years ahead of so many people just because he played Cosmology of Kyoto, you know.
Which my God, you're right.
Which is like how many, you know, how many other like it's just an odd thing of like. It's just
well,
like,
it's funny because he was not a game hater. He was not. His argument was never, I hate video games. You look at old videos of Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, they're playing video games on the NES. Like they're doing like little, you know, gimmick. They clearly have a good time. They like these things more than the culture did at the time.
Right.
It's just that he thought of them as toys and not as art. There was a categorization thing, not a, I think these things are worse.
And there is like, I did like at some point a few years ago, went back and like revisited the argument, and I go, that guy's right, you know, or like, or the strong counterpoints did not raise strong enough counterpoints, you know.
No, I think video games are art because I think that any medium of expression is art.
I think
that's my argument.
Right. I think he's getting splitting hairs about things and was not presented with like good counterpoints. And
people were just like, "Oh, you need to play Flower."
Yes,
like, that was their argument, which is not an argument.
No, it is like how to. Listen, I just don't want to pick on Flower, but that is also like.
No, I think Flower is a good game, but I think that it's one of those that's like that and Journey both. Again, not picking on that game company because I actually think that there were good people that worked there. That the team did good work. Those games are good. I like Flow a lot too. Like I liked Flow before it was on the PlayStation. The things that studio is doing get held up weirdly as like, this is what games as art are. When it's so much more than that, and it's so much weirder and deeper than that. And I think people just cite things that feel inscrutable to them because that's the box that they want to put them in. It's like, this is an inscrutable thing that I felt something out of, so that is art.
Yes. Anyway,
it's got the aesthetics of art, right?
Right.
What we.
It is very clearly aesthetically art, is understandable easily as art, quote unquote, like a thing you would see. Oh, like a painting in a gallery. That's what art looks like. Like right. The broadest definition of what art is, but you know that's a whole other like. You know, I'm not here to unpack Roger Ebert. Although, you know, because people are, critics and everything are imperfect. This is a guy who's like, I've probably quoted it almost verbatim on the show itself. The idea of, if you haven't seen read the opening paragraph of his review of I forget what, a Gamma movie, it's very good. It's basically the idea of and it is about art and because he talks about when you're young you think Gamera is a fun movie because it has a flying turtle, but then when you grow up and you're older and wiser, you think movies like Air Force One are good art because clearly a president fighting planes is more serious. But then you grow older and wiser still, and you realize they're both kind of absurd on different levels in the same way, but one of them has a flying turtle in it. And it is a lot of important, more serious stuff is of that cut of that same oh, well, this is serious because he's killing people and he's maybe saying bad words, but it's still a president on a plane fighting a bunch of terrorists or whatever. It's still a same level of absurdity, and no inherent deeper meaning. And games are kind of obsessed with that specific kind of deeper meaning game kind of thing. Not to make fun of other games that I'm going to pack away the haterism, if you want me to be a hater on things, you'll find me in real life, and I'll tell you what AAA games are basically third string AMC dramas.
I mean, listen, we can talk about the third string AMC drama-ness of game. This is the frustrating thing about games like The Last of Us, right?
Yes, that's the one I was thinking.
I know, but that's one everything.
Yeah.
So I was on. I was in the unfortunate position of defending The Last of Us on the No Cartridge podcast the other day, mostly because I think while the third string AMC-ness of it that you're citing is very real, it's a good video game. The game part of it is very good. It's an extremely strong systemic shooter.
Yes.
That has good stealth mechanics, and so there's a frustration thing of even in the critical spaces that I agree with, I think that there's a dismissal of the things that are done well in work that I think is propped. This goes back to the whole thing of nuance is dead.
Yes, right. And games are a weird medium that you can compartmentalize more than other mediums.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's an extremely bizarre thing that we exist in a world where one of the biggest franchises of all time is extremely good at doing the thing that nobody's praising it for.
Right.
Right? People do not care about The Last of Us because it's a crunchy, crispy, McDonald's-ified version of a Hitman game.
Yeah. But
they care about it because it's got zombies and it's sad.
Yeah, and it's games are a weird thing where you can take the best playing video game and throw the world's worst story on top of it.
Yes, yeah, 100%. That was the case for so many games for so long. To the point that we are still, as a medium, constantly saying the phrase, "Well, it's got good writing for a game."
Right. And it is it's so strange, and I think plenty of games since the creation of games have had well told stories, but those often are probably not in the same space of being the most popular things. Games I think are. I'm very, very interested to see where they are 10 or 15 years from now. As a medium. And how they're looked at and how they're understood, because I feel like it'll be very different than it is now. I can feel I keep with the kids, in this thing. I have a lot of young people routinely submitting games and making stuff, and being on the show, and and I go, oh, I feel a very different energy than what I think when I look at the industry, that I grew up with, so to speak.
I mean,
right.
it's an interesting question, right? Because The Last of Us is held up as the sort of prime example of games as art, and the narrative has perfectly been mixed together with the gameplay loop and the player verbs to sort of produce something with meaning. But I look at is what Naughty Dog's doing, that sort of track, like a bit of an evolutionary dead end, right? They were able to find the sort of perfect thematic wrapper around a game where you shoot a lot of people and collect trinkets. But if they don't come up with different verbs, how much space there is there to explore and make it sort of quote unquote artistically coherent. Um, so I don't know if there's going to have to be some sort of change, or whether it will come from a different type of angle together.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny you say evolutionary dead end, because I feel like that's a commonly thought or common sentiment around that kind of game. The game, like gameplay cutscene, right? Like that kind of structure, versus the I guess the more quote unquote modern semblance of how you tell a big game story, which is like the Half-Life thing of you are presented as a character in a world that is constantly advancing and there's no traditional cutscenes. And I don't know if either of those is really the thing, right? Like,
Sure.
to move forward, it's all tools in a toolbox at the end of the day, right? Like, I think I look at games like Outer Wilds, which kind of doesn't fit into either category. It's more the Half-Life thing than the other one, but like that is such a game of like you're just finding story. It's Myst, but it's not really Myst, because Myst is also more of a thing about the objects themselves that you're finding are the story, and Outer Wilds is the world that the objects exist in is the story. And that is so specifically the way it's done in that game, about the ways that physics are moving and like the planetary objects are moving, that it can't really be done outside of that context the same way. It's like there's a lot of ways to do things, I guess, at the end of the day.
I think that's the curious thing you run into with people. The words of like, innovation and things like that used around often, of like, the classic games are progressive, or as a progression, of like, oh, they get better year after year after year, and each thing is improving on them, when it's just there are these stylistic, like, things that are stylistically still, I think, good. I think a lot about. I've been touching a lot of PS2 games that have fixed camera angles, and I'm thinking, man, these things are good. And they like really work when they work. But the idea of progressing through things like, oh no, it's better to have the player to have the controller over the camera or whatever. Like fixed camera angles, those are an old thing.
Oh God, no! This sentiment of like things are outmoded or they're better or worse than the other things is so prevalent, especially in if you look at games criticism around like the early 2000s. It is a wild space, because it's like every single review is like, well, this game, the best example I can think of is Resident Evil.
Yes.
Because like you look at Resident Evil Code Veronica, and then all the reviews are like, yeah, well, it's just another Resident Evil. Right. It's like it's just another one of these. When it is, if you go back and play Resident Evil Code Veronica, it's one of like the most stellarly developed survival horror games probably of all time, and the only reason that people would give it grief is because it is standing next to some of the even more well-developed survival horror games of all time. And like in comparison, people were just eating so well compared to what they're doing now with a lot of stuff.
Like
it's just so weird.
I used to joke of as a joke example, I would use, like, when referring to like also rans, I would say I would use like Haunting Ground, but apparently everyone keeps saying that. People keep like, oh, I know what Haunting Ground is. I'm like, but it was like, it was a Capcom published survival horror game, had its own thing, but it's like, in the era, so much stuff like gets kind of tossed aside of like, oh, well, this isn't the right thing. It is funny to see FromSoft as like a tentpole when they are like the champion of the 7 out of 10 game for like 15 years, you know. If they
and
even
some confluence of events, and now they are like what everyone else is copying.
right,
Right.
if they could even reach the heights of a 7 out of 10, you know. And now people are going, you know, going back and going, oh, there are now Kingsfields like in 2025, you know.
Oh yeah, what Lunacid, right? Is that the one?
I'm
Yeah,
blanking
yeah.
on the exact name, but you know, there's touches of it in like Dread Delusion, which I think just like fully released recently. You know, there's like little smatterings of like old FromSoft and stuff everywhere, and that's kind of like
It's quite hopeful though, right? Like,
yeah,
it sort of mean, hopefully fixed camera angles will come back in a
yeah,
real way.
I mean, like, yeah, this is 100% the best value of the way that the indie space reinterprets old stuff, or
yeah,
the way that the hope of stuff not getting forgotten, right? Is we were just talking about how like Lovedelic and Onion Games and so forth like
yeah,
have been so influential, but you really don't see those things as central touch points. But like you look at a game like 24 Killers, that
yes,
is just a game doing Moon remix.
right,
Yeah.
And that you would never have seen 10 years ago. Like that way of like we're just going to directly like try to do a new one of those
yeah,
in a way that like that's not a thing that you would have seen in an older indie space, because I think that those touch points were not as commonly referenced. They weren't as things that you were able to really talk about the same way.
right, and the as and part of the benefit of like the march of time is that all those older things become easier to play on cheaper PCs, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, my
I mean,
PC is not new in the slightest, but it can run pretty much any PS2 game I want just fine.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, whenever any like remake for a PS2 game gets announced, I'm like, oh yeah, I should download that on my emulator.
Right.
uh, yeah.
Load it up, give it a
Um,
try. After this,
Yakuza,
uh, ta-
Yakuza is better on the on the PS2, so you should play that.
yeah, treat yourself to like, and right, another like, you know, that didn't take off until in the U.S. until like 0, you know.
Right, exactly.
Despite it being like this kind of like standby areas and like, listen, folks, people still play Shenmue. Shenmue fucking rules.
People should play Shenmue. I love Shenmue. I think Shenmue versus Yakuza
Way
is
different.
like it's like Apocalypse versus Deep Impact.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh no.
They have similar touchstones, but they're completely different video games. When you get down to the nitty gritty of how they work.
Yeah,
honestly, if you want to play something that's like Shenmue but is more accessible, it's weird to say in the term that you used accessible to describe this game, but play Deadly Premonition.
Right.
Hot
tip for Deadly Premonition: you could just go and change the controls in their menus and make it play like Resident Evil 4, and that changes 95% of that game's issues.
Yeah.
Like,
wow. Okay.
Like I realized you could just do that. Like people are like, oh, it plays so weird. I'm like, and I looked, I'm like, oh, you can just do that, and it is right. It's weird. It's idiosyncratic, and it's like, I think the thing I look forward most is not like the return of fixed cameras, the return of any one thing. It's more like a better understanding that there is no working towards a specific solution to problems in games.
Yes.
Like fairly recently.
Yeah.
I had watched, 2 different collections. I had watched Greg Araki's Teenage Apocalypse trilogy, and I had also watched like a collection of films from Chantal Akerman, 2 of which are like drastically different approaches to filmmaking, like stylistically, thematically, like content of the actual film wise, but like very good within their own rights. And like if you're approaching like this is how we solve filmmaking or whatever, you don't approach both of those things. Like, and I think that's a problem when you run into like, oh, we should solve these problems in games. You don't come across varied like works if you are like trying to solve something.
I mean, that's a thing, right? It's like for all the good that like the indie space and all the hope there is that these sort of old methods get reassessed. You would hope that there are some sort of new things that haven't been done before, right? That there's still more to explore. But it does seem that the indie space, especially the commercial one, is very sort of backward looking.
Yes, yeah,
And that is a gripe I have to some degree with it. But
right.
it's hard doing new stuff.
you can see it anecdotally of like if you like watch indie roundup blogs go from being like weird releases on itch and people's own websites to having all Steam releases, like the context of indie has changed in like observably in like the last 5 or 10 years, probably 10 years. I say 5, but once again 5 years. I was starting this, so it's probably 10 or 15. But speaking of the endless march of time, folks, this show is approaching 2.5 hours.
Oh my God!
So I'm gonna start wrapping it up. Before I get into the promotional part of wrapping it up, do either of you have any like pressing, not too massive statements, questions, things to get out?
I guess just I don't know.
Perfect.
Keep doing the thing. Keep doing thing.
Yes.
Make some stuff.
Perfect.
Submit to Indiepocalypse.
And speaking of people keep making and doing things, RJ, if people are looking to find your things that you keep making and doing, where would they be able to find them? Where do you want people to look?
So probably the first place is rj.dcellgames.com on Blue Sky. That's not a website you can go to. That's just my Blue Sky handle. Because you type in rj.dcellgames.com, it will not take you anywhere. But that's my Blue Sky handle, and I'll be posting all my stuff there and all the stuff related to what I do. At dcellgames.com, and dcellgames.com is actually a website, but that is the Blue Sky link for Dcell. And you should go wishlist Unbeatable, and you should listen to my music on Bandcamp, and go check that stuff out.
Yeah, I've highly encouraged people to, that's the whole point of this whole thing. I've got someone close who's like, man, who keeps talking about Unbeatable. He's like, when's this thing? He's like, hey, this thing. He's like, you heard about this thing? To the point where I was listening, I was listening to an album, and I was listening to the Sidney Gish album, No Dogs Allowed. And they both an Unbeatable track, and they don't sample the same thing, but they both sample like old instructional like records.
Oh yeah, the proper rhythm. I know.
Yeah. So both of them are he was curious to see where they came from. I ended up researching all three. They come from 3 different sources. Proper rhythm, I think, comes from an actual record, like a classic instructional record. The Sidney Gish's samples come from a coronet, one of those old coronet instructional videos, and like a Hearts Mountain like bird feeder instructional tape. But anyway, I only mentioned that just because there's a thing I thought about and it just stuck in my brain. And Finn, if people are looking for your games, where can people find those games?
Sure, yeah. So it's all on fakefrogsonly.itch.io. And same username on Blue Sky as well. I'll post progress and anything I'm working on there. I'd also like just to take the opportunity to shout out a meetup that I help run. It's sort of monthly. It's called Games, GAEMZ, the Games Meetup. There's a meetup that happens in London every month, and a meetup that also happens in Tokyo. So if you're in either of those cities and interested in meeting other people that are into experimental games and playful media in general, please give us a look. The website for that is gaemz.card.co. So yeah, just all our links are there. And
I know this. Yeah. I know this thing.
Oh, you've heard of it? Perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you're ever in London, Andrew, love to see you there.
One of these days, like I do want to. Like I have been to it. So I've been to Atlanta and New York and Columbus. I'm going to MagFest in 2 weeks. I'm thinking about a maze.
Yeah, that's my one to go to one day.
If the benefit is I can sell things when I travel, so I can kind of afford to travel, a little more. Like if I was
unfortunately, the UK does not. We're not doing great on game conventions these
yes, like
days. A lot of them.
the reason I mentioned a lot about how more game things should be marketplaces, it would really change the kind of people who can go to them. Because I am one of those people that if I could not sell things, I would not be going to these shows. If I had nothing to sell, you would not catch me dead at a Bagfest or an Anime NYC. Not because I dislike the shows, but because those things cost money. And if I was just going there in a preview context, I simply could not afford to drop.
Oh, same.
Like
the trips are very subsidized.
yes, exactly right. Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Like selling T-shirts, hey, that changes. Like, oh, we can sell T-shirts that, even if we don't make back all of our money, we make back some of it, which is more than you can say for most people going to these things.
Exactly. Yeah. It definitely changes the context and the conversation about how you're able to do things way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and then it's like you said, it's that self-selecting group of people who can afford to drop a couple $1,000s.
Right.
And just not to get it back, just to drop it on wish list for a game that may come out in 3 years, which is a whole thing. Of
Yeah.
who's got $1,000 to spend on it anyway? Indiepocalypse, of course, as mentioned earlier, you can always get it at indiepocalypse.com or pizzapranks.itch.io if you prefer to get it through a marketplace and not just a guy's website. You can always submit at indiepocalypse.com/submit. /tape will get you physical edition. /Patreon is what you think it is. You can also, if you get for only $5 a month, you can get all the new commissioned games there as well. If you want a new game style tier at a lower price. And I think that's everything. I've got a tape club where I sell other people's stuff. That's pizzapranks.com/tape market. I think I've got like 20 or 30 games on there now at this point. So if you want cool little these cassette physical versions of a bunch of neat indie games, get them there or catch me in person and buy them from me there. That's it. I don't think I have anything else to say. RJ, Finn, thank you both for joining me here today. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Pleasure to sit and chat.
No, thank you so much.
I'm looking for my stuff as I keep prattling on, trying to find Fubar, and I found Fubar. Goodbye.